Hey everybody. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first CoCreate. My name is Courtney Brown Warren, and I'm the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer at Kickstarter. And I'm really excited to talk about crowdfunding success and talk through some crowdfunding case studies with three amazing founders here. We've got Christian Reed, who's the founder of Recon Tools. We've got Hannah McPhee, who founded Nanu. And we've got Jose Cardona, who founded Author & Co. So welcome. So just to start this off and just to set the stage, I kind of want to just talk about your origin story. I want to get a little sense of who you are, what your companies are about, and I want to hear how many successful campaigns you've run on Kickstarter. So let's start with you, Christian. Tell us a little bit about Recon.
Great, yeah, so hello everyone. My name's Christian Reed. I've run 5 successful Kickstarter campaigns, 6th one coming up pretty soon, and Recon makes a variety of construction and home improvement tools. So do a variety of everything from digital tape measures to software to manage measurements, and Kickstarter has played an indispensable role in both growing Recon tools and maintaining our independence as we have no external capital, completely bootstrapped, self-funded, and again, the gift that keeps giving over the many years that we've been working with Kickstarter, and an indispensable way to launch new products.
Love that. Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I've done 5 Kickstarter campaigns, 3 with a brand called Fellow, where I was the first employee, and then I've since started my own company called Nanu, and we make timepieces that helps make time feel more tangible for you, gets you away from tech. And yeah, we've done 2 campaigns with Kickstarter, and we're coming up on our 3rd soon as well.
Hi, my name's Jose Cardona. I was an avid Kickstarter backer. I've had over 20 projects that I've backed over the years, and eventually that led me to start my own projects. I've launched 3 successful, not 5, 3 successful Kickstarter campaigns around this company called Author & Company, where our goal is to create a lifestyle brand for people who really love reading by combining technology and literature into moments in our everyday lives.
So let's talk a little bit about market fit and how you even realized that Kickstarter was something, or crowdfunding in general was something that you wanted to pursue. Christian, when you think about your company, you're kind of B2B. It's not just, it's B2B to C. So you have builders and pros that you work with, as well as just the consumer that's buying your wares. But what was the moment that you knew that there was a market for what you were doing? Kind of like, what was that moment? And then the second part to that question is, how did you know that crowdfunding was going to play a part in that?
Yeah, so Kickstarter, in retrospect, and can share the origins, is a gift that keeps giving with it. So a lot of the lessons and growth we've had at Recon have not been intentional. They've been, doing things that we think made sense and turned out to be the right thing later on with it. So, to highlight that to the full level, we launched our first Kickstarter really as a side project. We were not fully intending to start a company, leave our full-time jobs, where we actually worked at another Kickstarter origin company, Formlabs, where we made desktop 3D printers, and did it as a side project. And then when you look at a campaign take off, and we had launched in 2020, so some uncertainty around COVID, what that meant, but when you see the ticker keep going up, and you wind up with $1.2 million, you start to question of like, hey, is this a side project, or can we turn this into a full business with it? So I think that was certainly, both validated the market that this concept, and then we transitioned from side project to how do we make this a full sustaining company and grow our portfolio, core mission, and everything associated with it. But really the idea that, not only did Kickstarter help validate the idea, it gave us funding and allowed us to avoid the traditional route, which is ingrained in our heads, which is get external capital or get venture backing, which comes with its own drawbacks, and maintaining independence certainly has been a great, comes with its own set of challenges, but certainly a great way for us to be able to progress without the overhead or pressure of going away, which may not be true to our mission at the end of the day.
Yeah. Hannah, you have a little bit of a different story though, because you did run Kickstarter campaigns with Fellow, and then with your current company, you decided to also run Kickstarter campaigns, but you've also looked at traditional institutional backing. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and the cons and how you might supplement other types of financial backing with your crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, so for a little more background, Fellow did 3 Kickstarter campaigns, had some angel funding, and then now has growth equity. And then Nanu, my business now, has 2 Kickstarter campaigns, a little bit of bootstrapping, a little bit of angel investing, and also inventory loans. So I think we've done almost every possible type of financing imaginable. And Kickstarter is a really interesting tool for that, because no matter what your plan is for the future for financing, it gives you the flexibility to just figure it out as you go. So if you're getting an inventory loan, you need to show that you have revenue, you need to understand your debt ratio, and obviously having money in the bank and having sales in the bank helps with that. Kickstarter helps. If you're trying to fundraise from institutional financing, or if you're trying to fundraise from angels, they're going to ask you about product validation, market validation, things like that. Kickstarter is also a really great tool for that. So I think of, and I'd also just like to say, every time I worked at a startup where we thought we understood how we were going to finance it, 6 months later, that plan changed. So having the flexibility that like Kickstarter gives you to think like, oh, maybe I'll do VC funding in the future, and then realize, oh, you know what, actually that's really not right for this business model and where we've transitioned. It's just a really helpful tool that gives you that flexibility.
Yeah. What about for you, Jose?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Just in terms of how you determine that you're the Author & Co., and I know you have a few different products under the Author & Co. umbrella, but initially, how did you determine that crowdfunding was the right fit for you? And then, thinking about crowdfunding versus traditional institutional backing, how did you make those determinations?
Yeah, certainly. So the idea for Author & Company is very novel, right? There was no product out there that existed that I could compare to and explain to people. I still sometimes struggle to explain exactly what I do. But with that, the problem at hand is I needed a lot of money. The products were difficult to make. They required a lot of testing, a lot of programming, a lot of research. And the days of walking into a bank with like a firm handshake and a business plan and getting a loan to get your business going ended a very long time ago. So I knew I needed a lot of money. I knew I was trying to prove that this product that had never existed before deserved to exist. And Kickstarter, I was an avid backer, as I mentioned before. I had backed many projects, some successful, some not. But I knew that it was a great place to bring new things to life. And there were two parts to that. So I mentioned money, right? We all need money. But in my case, one of my first product, the Author Clock, uses quotes from books to tell the time every minute of the day. So right now, it's almost 2:30. So it would say a quote that would say something like, at 2:30, Sherlock Holmes walked into 221B Baker Street. So we needed to find that quote, and we needed to find thousands of other quotes. So we didn't just do crowdfunding, we also did crowdsourcing. We didn't know when we started that there were enough quotes written in literature that mentioned every single minute of the day. Some people had made art installations and stuff around this idea, and that was a great start. But it was really the crowdsourcing side, that community building, explaining to people what we were trying to do and how they could help us, and getting thousands upon thousands of submissions from works from all over the world.
So you just touched on something, the community building part. And I think that's the piece that people just think of crowdfunding, and it's like, oh, I need to get some money, I need to fund my business, and then that's it. And then I just fund my business and move on. But there's a piece to this that I want to talk a little bit about the playbook, because you guys have come back. You've come back repeatedly, and you've seen crowdfunding work for you. What's the playbook? Is it about building the community? Is it about, ways to just continue to get funding? Is it a little bit of both and more? Can you just talk a little bit more about that with all of you, but start with you, Christian?
Yeah, I generally think of three ways that crowdfunding plays a role, which differs from initially to start the company, and then how does it play a sustaining role of why we keep coming back to it after 5 years. The first is from a financial perspective, hardware is super capital intensive. Anyone who's made a product know that there's money associated with it, and the idea that you can just go to a bank and get a loan just isn't a thing anymore. Maybe it was in the 80s and 90s, but that's not a reality. So having crowdfunding as a way to both validate an idea, people trust you enough to give you some amount of money, which is basically an interest-free loan for an indeterminate period of time. That obviously there's some trust component to that, but assuming you deliver on it, it's a great financial mechanism from there. So I think that's the first part. The second is certainly the hype and excitement around it. Like there's just no better way to get buzz and excitement of see that number go up, the number of backers increase on it, and some people have tried to build their own websites, but why bother, right? There's so many other things where we're adding direct value that no one else can do with it, and to save a percentage or two of making our own website, like Kickstarter is the de facto platform for that. So I think that's two, and then three is community. That the value of a backer, both financially as well as community-driven, like supporter, champion, the one who's going to comment on social media posts and say, hey, Recon is awesome, they have great products with it. Like Kickstarter is 200x what any other, both in terms of, engagement we have with them, feeling a part of the community, so just really indispensable in that regard, and I think that's what keeps us coming back now for our 5th campaign at Recon and what continues to make it indispensable in our growth as a company.
Yeah. What about for you, Hannah? Do you find that the community really helps to continue to build your brand as well?
Yeah, we, so I think of Kickstarter as a finance tool, a marketing tool, and a design tool. We talked about finance. On the marketing side, it can help catapult your brand in front of a bunch more people than you might otherwise be able to afford, because at this point, most social is pay to play unless you're getting a viral moment, which is really hard to do. But then the design element, which really, I think marketing and design overlap quite a bit, is I think where Nanu does the best. So we, both on social and Kickstarter, have done what's been called built in public. So we're very upfront about what we're thinking, what we're doing next, what we're struggling with. And backers are an incredible resource for just giving input on, like, hey, don't do that. Or maybe like, I actually like this color better. And they're really opinionated. And obviously sometimes that can be frustrating because maybe you have a different opinion than them. But I think it's a pretty amazing gift to have a pool of thousands of people that are really on board to help you create a product if you're willing to share that experience with them. And it also helps you unlock some really, different interesting things about your product. So for us, I think we have a couple different special sauces in how tactile and delightful our products are. And we've sent our products out to our Kickstarter backers as beta testers. And they've given us really great feedback on wow, that just feels like magic every day for me. And I think that's been a special sauce for us for just making really good products.
And Jose, what about you?
Yeah, I think that community building aspect has been enormously valuable for us. We've started to launch more products now, and we see that loyalty of customers coming back. They met us back when we were really scrappy. We just had an idea, sketches, a little prototype that we had made, and now they understood the vision. They have been through the journey. They saw that authenticity. They really believe us when we tell them we're going to do something now, and they trust us again and again. And online, we all know how harsh social media comments can be. The YouTube comment section, we were just joking about that backstage. And it used to be early days, and we'd get these harsh comments from people. What's the point of this? Why are you doing this? Why this is too expensive? I don't get it. And we'd have to always well, this is the idea behind it, and might not be for you, and so and so. But now we just find that by the time we reach that comment, there's already been half a dozen people who backed us originally, and just have already kind of answered for us, defended us. And someone on my team said something like, we love all our customers, but equally, but we love our Kickstarter backers more equally than others. Yeah.
But it's the brand advocacy, right? I would say they become brand advocates, and without necessarily even knowing that they're being a brand advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. And they talk about us to their friends. They present it. They repost what we post. They want to be there when we talk about events that we're doing or things that we're launching. It really is that community that has come together through these products and this sort of shared story, and in our case, a love of literature.
Yeah, I think that's the secret sauce that some people don't realize. When you think of crowdfunding, you don't realize, especially with repeat campaigns, that you really build out this very hyper effective community, and the brand advocacy that you get from the community is great. So continuing to talk through the playbook a little bit, the playbook to success. Christian, you've raised over $8 million on Kickstarter and in crowdfunding. So clearly something's working, you know what you're doing. what's the secret to your success? Are there elements to your campaign strategy, things that you think about that you think you'd want to share with some of the folks here to maybe say if you're thinking about doing this, or if you've done it before, these are the things that I found to be super successful for us?
Yeah, I think like many things at a startup, some of it is by design, some of it is by the shotgun approach of trying a bunch of different things, and other is a combination of luck, timing, intelligence to figure out the right thing and happening to do it at the right time with it. So Recon started at the time that TikTok was taking off, which completely changed what was previously dominated by the Instagram story, a nice curated collection of aesthetic photos, to TikTok, which is, as anyone who's ever been on, the Wild West of short format videos. And I think that's something that we were an early adopter, an early investor on, starting in 2020, of just making short format videos. And now to today, if anyone follow us on any social platform at Recon Tools, and we have literally 1.3 million followers on TikTok, close to 1 million on Instagram, and that's the gift that keeps giving with it, of just community and content creation. I think I talk to a lot of people about crowdfunding, starting a company, hardware, software, and the easiest, lowest overhead way to do it, if you have, of course, the appetite for it, is to make content, whether it's, like Hannah said, building in public, putting out videos of your product, use cases, highlighting users. Like, content is the single biggest and greatest revolution that TikTok started and everyone copied with YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and so on across the social platforms. But I think that there are many things which lead to a successful campaign, but probably the highest one, that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, and 1 + 1 can equal 10, 20, 100, is putting out content, figuring out a muscle of how to do that on your team as an organization. And that's the gift that has, coincidentally worked out on the first campaign, something we realized took off, and have made a significant time investment consistently every day for the past 5 years, and just continues to return dividends in both Kickstarter, when we transition to selling on Amazon, Home Depot, and everything else with it. But just the ability to make content, highlight your product, talk about it, and create that conversation of continuing to grow the community, and highlight it of something that's always potential to go viral, and algorithmically surfacing to people who are most interested in your product at a given time.
That's great. And do you guys agree? Is social king for you as well, in terms of your crowdfunding strategy as well as your overall business strategy?
Yeah, I'd say one thing I tell, we're both on the Kickstarter Advisory Council, and one thing I tell creators that are thinking about starting a campaign is build your audience as much as possible before you start your campaign, so you can just get a wider reach. And I think content is the most affordable way to get brand awareness these days. And it is, like, if you can go viral or mini viral or even like baby viral, it's still really, really useful, and it does convert sales. And then I think the other thing about content that has worked really well for Nanu is trust building. So I think nowadays it's easier more than ever to build a brand online and to sell products online. And it's also really easy to, maybe not easy, but it's easier to create beautiful marketing. And I think a lot of consumers are really burnt out on purchasing a product from a brand that makes beautiful marketing and then receiving the product and it just does not deliver on what they were promised. And so content, and Kickstarter for that matter, is a really good way to build trust with your consumers, to get maybe not your face, but someone's face in front of the camera, to show the people behind the brand, the passion behind the brand, the quality behind the brand, so that your consumers or future consumers will trust you, because it's actually quite hard. There's just so many people selling now at this point that if you don't have consumer trust, it's really hard to have a low cost to acquisition.
Jose, do you agree?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is launching into a vacuum. People, we're creators. Some of us are designers or engineers, and we're really, really focused on the product. One of the best pieces of advice, after going on a spiel over my product and the details and why it was amazing, this friend of mine who's a marketer was like politely nodding, looking at me while I kept talking about all these details. And at the end of it, he told me, "That's great, but no one will ever care about the details of your design as much as you. So you need to stop focusing on those details, and you need to start thinking about your marketing, your social media presence, and you need to make sure that the day that you launch, people know how great your product is, as opposed to like waiting and just hoping that these people come to you naturally.
You speak a little bit to the marketing piece too, like the messaging is important, right? Like how are you messaging, how are you getting that message across to your community? How are you explaining, how do you build a narrative on what your product is and why it's worth trying out? I feel like Nanu does a great job, Hannah. So does Author and Company. Like just because you guys are in that kind of like design, creative space, can you talk a little bit about how you figured out how to find your sweet spot there? Because that's not easy.
So Nanu is a really tough marketing challenge because everything we build helps make time feel more tangible, which is a really abstract thing. But the best example I can give is when you look down at your phone to answer a text and you look up 40 minutes later and you've been on Instagram and you've answered 3 emails, and it's just this time warp where it's like, where did those 40 minutes go? We're trying to do the opposite of that. You feel more in control of your day and your routine. So that's like a really abstract concept. On top of that, we make products that really, the level of quality we're going after is not done that much in mid-tier consumer electronics anymore. All of our products are die-cast and machined. We have a real mechanical chime in our alarm clock. Like there's a real little solenoid in there striking an aluminum chime bar. And consumers, it's really hard for them to understand that. Like they assume our product is plastic. They assume our alarm is digital. And that makes sense because you have a lot of digital alarm clocks out there. You have a lot of plastic products out there. So it all comes down to marketing effectively to figure out how to do that. And I'd give myself, honestly, a C- on our Kickstarter campaign for ARC for doing that. I think I assumed people would understand what we were doing, and they didn't. And I'm really grateful to our backers because they were patient with us. They got what we were putting down, and then they gave us a ton of feedback to help us understand what we could have done better. And so I think just like being really close to your customer to really understand the marketing messaging you're putting out, and does it actually resonate with people? Do they actually understand what you're saying is super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our case, I think we really leaned into the literature, the storytelling side for our marketing story and how we presented ourselves to our customers. At the heart of it, we are people who love reading and literature. I'll admit I don't read nearly as much as I'd like, and I think that's a very common thing. I used to read a lot, and I try to be authentic to that and not claim that I'm the most voracious reader anymore. I'd like to read more. I'd like to have a tighter relationship with literature, and that's part of why these products came to be, right? That allow us to bring literature into these small moments in our lives. But with that comes pieces of stories, characters, authors across time and across cultures. Our second product, the author forecast, tells you the local weather with quotes from books. So you might see it was a dark and stormy night, and you look outside, and it is in fact dark, nighttime, and storming. And with that, we found our oldest quotes date back 3,000 years. And we might sit here staring at our phones and looking at like little technological miracles, but someone wrote down on a clay tablet 3,000 years ago about how this character in the Epic of Gilgamesh was trying to avoid this thunderstorm that was getting wet and they were struggling with. And that's a story that happened 1,000 years before paper was invented. And you can sit here still and sort of feel that connection through time and culture. And that message really resonates with our backers and people who love and appreciate literature, even though we don't always read as much as we'd like.
Right. So now that you've got your strategy together and you figured out some of your marketing for various types of products, when it comes down to you successfully funded, now you got to think about how you're going to fulfill it. And that's daunting. And I'm sure a lot of people here think about that in terms of just customers, orders, how are they fulfilling. And when you have a Kickstarter campaign, you've got all this money now and a lot of very excited backers who want to get their stuff immediately. How do you reconcile that, and what tools and resources do you use? I'll start with you, Christian.
Yeah, so I think I was a little spoiled, and when you graduate school, you come out all high and mighty that I notionally know how to injection mold, I notionally know how to do this, and then you get crushed in reality with it. And I think competing with that is the idea of like working for a flashy brand like Apple or Tesla, but you realize that that's a subsidized experience of manufacturing a product there because everything's already figured out. So by myself working at a startup, Formlabs, there was a lot of we don't know the answer, so figure it out. So that to me was a 5-year education on how to make a product, and led to a lot of success that we had at Recon, which I think everyone learns at some point involves a little bit of networking and a lot of just hustle with it. And I think, obviously the namesake of the conference, Alibaba, is generally the gateway to starting something new. When you have a product, a lot of times, the pieces of like, I need to make this part, this needs to be like kind of a die cast, this needs to be injection molded, I have an e-paper screen on my product with it. You notionally know that, and Alibaba's a place like, who makes this? What's out there with it? So you start there and then start to work your way down the rabbit hole, find the individual components, figure out how to integrate them together, what quality is going to burn you on the back end of putting it into a product, and figure out. And I think, A, it's not more complicated than that, and B, it never gets easier, right? Having now shipped hardware products for close to 15 years, you always think like, oh, A, I'll figure it out and it'll be easier, or B, if I raise a bunch of money, I'll hire someone to do it. Neither of which is ever true. Those people don't exist, they're unicorns, and B, it never gets easier. No matter if it's changing the color, a few Pantone shades on a packaging, or an entire printed circuit board is not working, it's always painful, it's always teeth pulling, and I think you just have to accept that. But having tools and having a gateway to the best place to manufacture anything, which is still, despite tariffs and the rhetoric in the media, China, is having a gateway to access that entire network and start the conversation has been invaluable since we used it at Formlabs 10 years ago, and invaluable today when we source a new component or supplier capability of starting to search and then going down the rabbit hole to see how do we now integrate this into the product we're trying to make.
Yeah. Now, Hannah, you have a different type of product, so how do you source, and how are you finding materials and all the different pieces that you need to fulfill and build?
Yeah, so we, my co-founder and I had both been in hardware for almost a decade before, so we had contacts in China that we just knew personally. Like, we'd been to their birthday parties, we'd been to some weddings, so that was pretty cool. Alibaba's been really helpful, though, in terms of just having exposure into pricing for different parts and being able to compare and contrast, because sometimes it can be a little bit of a black box with manufacturers of like, how much am I paying for the part? How much am I paying for labor? How much am I paying for assembly? And we found Alibaba to be really helpful of just understanding pricing and just like where the market is at for different parts. Having said that, almost all of the parts on our alarm clock are custom made. So we did make that really difficult for ourselves. But always having a marketplace that you can just gut check things on is super helpful. And then I think one thing that I like to always impart on folks is we go to China quite a bit to build in-person relationships with our manufacturers. That's not always possible for everybody, but I think no matter where you're sourcing, it's really great to, and I think Alibaba is a good portal for this, to build a relationship with your factories and with your vendors, because they're people at the end of the day that have their own business and their own woes and concerns, and just like meeting them at a human level and getting to know them, I think is really useful to just help figure out fulfillment and the whole logistics pipeline.
Yeah. Now, somebody told me you have an engineering background, Jose. So did that help you when it came to figuring out how to fulfill, source? I've talked to other creators, and sometimes having some of these logistical backgrounds, I mean, like Hannah mentioned, she was in hardware for 10 years. Christian also comes from, but like if you not coming from that place, how would you start, But you come from engineering, so maybe that did help you. I don't know. Tell me.
Yeah, so I was a very, very sort of traditional mechanical engineer. I worked in aerospace, and then I worked in nuclear engineering for a while. And then eventually, when you do that kind of work, you find that you might spend your entire life building one of something. And I just got this itch that I really wanted to make like a million of something. I really thought it was a very, very different problem set. Those industries are very, very slow. They're very, very regulated, which is great. I'm glad that they're very regulated. But that wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted a more fast-paced environment, a place where I didn't just own one bolt in one piece of one part. I wanted to really have a lot of ownership, and that brought me to mass production and product design. So early days when I started these, my first product didn't have any electronics, and I used Alibaba. What I did was I found suppliers who made products that seemed to have a similar skill set to what I needed, right? They weren't the exact same thing I wanted because I wanted a custom thing, but I could tell someone who can make this can probably make my idea as well. And that original one, it was like the spinning device that, showed off some unintuitive physics, a very engineering-y thing. But in any case, I reached out to these manufacturers, a very important thing if it's a manufacturer in a country that is not your own, set up a lot of calls, talk to them, and make sure that you can talk about the very detailed technical things via video, because if in those early days when you're trying to build a relationship, they're not putting in all this effort to make sure your communication's great, your communication isn't going to get better from there, right? So through that process, I was able to build that first product. I found the manufacturers. I sent them all my files and things like that. And to your point about my technical background, I'd say it can sometimes work against you. I wanted to be very sort of prescriptive. I sent them every drawing, every tolerance, every detailed material, surface finish, whereas I later in my my product design journey, met other people who were like, oh, no, I have no technical background. I sent them some PowerPoint slides with some stuff, like arrows of I like this finish and this material looks good. And you know what? On that side, there's a bunch of really, really smart people who work on this way more than I do and understand tolerancing and dimensions and surface finishes way better. So I've learned to fight that instinct, take a step back, and trust the process. And now we have found a manufacturer who makes all of our products, and I trust those guys with my life. They're brilliant. They come up to me whenever there's an issue, and they always have 2 or 3 proposed solutions. It's like, here's what we found, here's what we think we should try, and that kind of relationship takes time. And to Hannah's point, I do think it's very valuable to go out there, to meet them in person, and to kind of keep building that relationship over time.
It's awesome. I think it's helpful, right, to have the in-person relationship as well as the tools and resources that you can use to help you with your sourcing. So now let's just take a step back and from a 30,000-foot view, we've talked about your origins, we've talked about kind of how you built out your campaigns and some of the strategies behind it, the messaging and all of that, the importance community plays. But when you're thinking about the fact that you guys have come back to crowdfunding time and time again, why? Why would you continue to come back? What is the reason? What's your why for making it essentially, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost sounds like it's become a part of your business model. So why do you do that? And what do you find, what's successful in your business from doing so? Christian?
Yeah, I think it's anything you do in business, you try to find, what gives you a competitive advantage or untapped potential. And I think crowdfunding has, a meme behind it of you do it once to launch a novelty product and you keep it as a side hustle, where there are, countless examples of billion-dollar companies who have both launched on crowdfunding as well as companies who, they're not crowdfunding companies by name, but crowdfunding is a valuable platform the same way Amazon is a valuable platform. And I think for us, crowdfunding has become for us specifically, a de facto tool to launch a new product. It's just, you can't replicate the excitement of launching a new product, the financial benefits of, as I mentioned before, basically an interest-free loan. And it's a meme that you can get cheaper, easier capital anywhere else with it, but the capital comes at the cost of trust, community, and having a reputation, right? People don't back a random campaign, and everyone has their horror stories on crowdfunding, which is offset by the successes and ones that have grown. Sometimes even behind the scenes, right? Not many people know that, Peloton started on there, Oura Ring, these, household names now that all started on Kickstarter or crowdfunding that are taken for granted, but started on there, even if they were VC backed as well, right? So not everyone has the same purpose for there, but both the validation community you could build up, and for us, a recurring tool to both build community, raise funds, and build up that pre-excitement hype it can't be replicated somewhere else. And again, for any company trying to get a competitive advantage, it's just not everyone knows about it. So again, it's a hidden gem that's there for the taking. Again, the barrier has never been lower to make a crowdfunding campaign, but just not many people are diving in and trying to take advantage of it to its fullest extent.
Yeah. What do you guys feel about that, Hannah?
I mean, for me, it's the community aspect that Christian touched on. I think the holy grail of marketing is word of mouth. So that like beautiful moment when two friends are sitting in their kitchen and one says, I have this amazing product that I got off of Kickstarter and it's changed the way I wake up in the morning, which is like obviously what I hope people say about our alarm clock. And our backers do that. Like they come to my rescue on TikTok comments. They tell their family and friends about it. We did like a referral program with them, and they were so strong in just getting the word about our products. They've given us amazing reviews, and that type of support is worth its weight in gold. It's one thing to have a customer purchase your product, but if you have somebody who, I don't know if folks are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, but somebody who is well above like an 8, where they are going to sing from the mountaintops about why your brand is amazing to them, that can be like the lifeblood of a brand and a brand's growth. And I mean, for us, we've really, really invested in our relationships with our backers because we know that they are the reason we're here and they're the reason we're growing.
Would you call them early adopters? Are they the early adopters to your product?
I think so. Yeah, I think like our alarm clock is this kind of Frankenstein between digital and analog. It's an analog clock with this like discrete digital display, but it has a mechanical chime. And I think it was a very unique object. It's unique looking as well. And I think Kickstarter backers were uniquely positioned to be like really curious about that product and adopt it. And I do think that with them, we kind of got that critical mass to like snowball into people being like, oh, this is interesting. And then we started getting press and good reviews and stuff. So yeah, they're definitely our early adopters.
Yeah. Would you say the same thing, Jose, or do you have a different take?
No, I'd say for our case, coming back to Kickstarter, like it's a no-brainer. It's so easy every time to get set up. Like Christian was saying, like the barrier to entry is so low that in our case, we already have this big community there. People really deliver a lot of very useful early feedback in a way that you wouldn't get through like a normal pre-order on your website. And above all else, Kickstarter backers are far more understanding and knowledgeable than the average consumer, I would say. They are very interested in the details of your journey. They understand when you explain to them why something is delayed or why something is not ready yet. So yeah, we plan to keep coming back.
That's awesome. So in our last few minutes, I want to do like a quick lightning round of like just advice to entrepreneurs, advice to crowdfunding. I'll start, since I've been starting with Christian, I'll start with you, Jose. What's your advice that you would give an entrepreneur who's thinking about crowdfunding or maybe thinking about coming back and just thinking about starting?
So I think this is general to all entrepreneurs. You're gonna have bad days. You're going to have days where you really don't know how you're going to get out of this situation. They don't come that often, but it's all about your frame of mind, is what I would say. I used to really struggle with this. I used to let it ruin my day or week, and it was as soon as I fixed one problem, I felt like another enormous one came. And now the way I think about this is when everything's going well, I barely have a job. Like, I'm sure I'm trying to find new customers, I'm trying to like maintain the relationships and do forecasting and inventory and all that sort of stuff. But anyone can do that. That's almost maintenance. My job begins the days where things go wrong. And having that frame of mind has allowed me to sort of, you know what, I got a terrible email from my manufacturer saying that so-and-so component is delayed or such thing was installed incorrectly. Sit down, all right, it's time to get to work. This is where my job begins.
Yeah. What about you, Hannah?
I would say it takes a really long time to build a brand. After going through it with Fellow, they're 12 years old now and doing great, and Nanu is in its baby stages. It takes a really long time to build brand equity and to get a following as well. I mean, if you're early on TikTok, that does help. So I would say it is never too early to start creating content and start building branding content, even if you don't have a product yet. So we started on TikTok actually taking apart vintage clocks and refurbishing them. We did not have a product yet, but we knew the direction that we were going. And that just helped us connect with an audience that we thought would be interested in our future product. It just takes so long to build brand equity, especially if you're trying to build like a more premium or quality brand. The earlier you can start and the more consistent you can be with it, the better off you're going to be when you actually launch your product.
Christian?
Yeah, I think I interact with a lot of entrepreneurs, both in people who are aspiring Kickstarter creators and in general, and my prompt to them, both partially as a joke and partially serious, is what are you scared of? And I think a lot of people are afraid to take that first step, afraid of failure, afraid of jumping into it. And as my old director of engineering used to say, that there's, at a startup especially, there's never a good time to take a vacation, which means there's never a bad time to take a vacation. And I think that parallels kind of a startup launching a Kickstarter, of that if you're looking for an excuse, you'll find one. Hey, I'm waiting to buy a house, start a family, wait till my kids are in elementary school, high school, college. And if you have that attitude, it'll never happen. And it'll just continue to drag out and be one of those conversations that people around you encourage, but you're afraid to take that first step with it. So that's generally my advice of asking, what are you afraid of? And just send it, right? And again, it's not, people sometimes assume like, oh, that means quit my full-time job and do it. But we set the groundwork for our $1 million plus campaign working a full-time job. So yes, that does mean working, double what it normally would, but is a risk mitigated strategy. So I'm not encouraging people to, full send it and quit their job, but there are many progressions to get there with it. And a lot of the hangups I see are people who are afraid to take that first step. Once you're into it, it can really quite literally change your life and open the sky, but only if you take that initiative versus spending the rest of your life wondering what could have happened, what could have been, or how it would have turned out.
Well, I thank you all for a really insightful conversation, for your transparency, and for your energy that you've brought to the conversation. If anybody in this room is just thinking about taking that first step and thinking about crowdfunding for that first or next step in your career, please consider Kickstarter. Thank you, everybody.